people using my software wrong. Okay. So we built it for a certain thing, but what we found was that we as developers couldn't communicate well enough or weren't communicating well enough for the people to convince them to use the software in the fashion it was designed. And so they weren't getting the value out of this software. Working our fingers to the bone to build these really cool, neat features, and nobody was using them. And what it turns out is that you can make all the greatest features in the world, but if you don't have a means of communicating it, you're never going to get people to use them.
Welcome to another episode of the Freight Forward podcast. I'm Matt Dixon, your host, and today we have Justin Cramer, and he is the co-founder and VP of Product Integration at ProShip Incorporated. Justin, great to have you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, Matt. Thank you. Yeah, I got lucky. I got to work with a bunch of friends 20 some odd years ago, 26-ish, 27-ish years ago, to start a technical company. Been lucky enough to make a bunch of good decisions and have some good partners in the process, to the point where we build a company where we produce about 2 billion small parcel shipping labels a year. So we affect a decent amount of the North American small parcel and LTL market. In that process, I've been able to learn all the different things associated with business, or at least with a technical business, from the development side where I come from, through implementation, integration, project management, sales, and of course, one of the most important things that you can learn as a founder is how to pass on those skills to somebody else so you can do new roles.
Yeah, I love that. And you said you were a software developer. I was as well. A lot of people just hold on to that as tightly as they can because they love being in the weeds.
Mhm.
Really not very detail oriented, which is surprising, but a lot of people love that. What's your take on that? Did you enjoy software development? Are you glad you're out? Do you want to go back, or is there like what's your perspective?
It was I will say at first it was hard to leave, but what drove me out was people, and it's going to sound bad, people using my software wrong. Okay. so so we built it for a certain thing, but what we found was that we as developers couldn't communicate well enough or weren't communicating well enough for the people to convince them to use the software in the fashion it was designed. And so they weren't getting the value out of this software. Here we were, working our fingers to the bone, theoretically, working our fingers to the bone to build these really cool, neat features, and nobody was using them. And what it turns out is that you can make all the greatest features in the world, but if you don't have a means of communicating it, you're never going to get people to use them.
Yeah, it's almost like Microsoft Word back in the day when it was before it was cloud. Like, how many times have you done mail merge? And it was a big feature. I used it like once. So yeah, that's interesting. So as you scaled your company, how did your software have to change? Like 10% of all North American shipments, that is a huge number.
Yeah, especially when we started from a customer that did like 100 shipments a day. Okay, so that was where we started with about 8 customers that did that, and so, yeah, it's a huge amount moving up. I mean, there was some difficult decisions. One of the single most difficult decisions was you buy, build, or partner, and we were partnered at the beginning with, the engine technology folks, and we were kind of forced to start building that deep knowledge. And I like to talk about how deep knowledge is an important thing, and it's something that needs to be developed in your teams over years. So you have to have an intentional process to do that. But that's what really started us, took us from what was an integration house, a company that basically said, hey, here's your data in your ERP, your WMS, maybe your CRM. Let's pull this in so we can get it into the shipping product itself, right? That was where we first started understanding data flow. But then we had to go deeper. We had to take that spike and just really take that tap root and just go down and down, down. So we had to build carrier engines, because if we built the engines, we couldn't, or I'm sorry, not that we couldn't pass the blame anymore, but instead we could take the credit and we could solve the problems. Okay. And that was really a big thing, because our original goal was to make the implementation process as smooth as possible, ensuring that that data never had to be typed twice, right? That's just it was just so wasteful to us as a concept that somebody would have to retype anything, right? Why? I mean, mind you, this was the early 2000s, but even back then, we had, relational databases, various means of moving data around. You had all of these things that could do all of that for you, so people didn't have to. So already we were thinking, what is the purpose of a human being? The purpose of a human being is to bring the creativity, the checking, the things that we can't do in software yet. So people shouldn't be hand typing addresses. People should be scanning a single barcode, and then they should be looking to make sure that that box with the motor that's going in there, the makeup that's going in there, that, you pick whatever product you're doing, depending upon which market segment you're in, you want to be making sure that thing doesn't have damaged corners, that it's the right box, it's the right color. All of these things that, though, right now, computer vision is starting to catch up with, but this is all something which you don't really even have to train a person to do, right?
No.
It says red there. Make sure it's red. Don't put the green one in the box. That's really simple. And that is stuff that humans do well. Hand typing and making sure that you get North Main Street versus East Main Street is not something that we as humans do well. So starting from there, from that ease of the process, from the goal of reducing duplicates, and then needing to then control the rest of the process, causing us to build our own carrier components, it just kind of naturally unfolded. I won't say it was easy. It was a hard decision when we first started doing it. And in some cases, I'll be honest with you, it was a bit of a dare. I bet you can't by next Monday kind of thing, right? But it was a dare that paid off really, really well. And is a dare that continued to pay dividends time and time again.
Yeah,
So,
I like that. There's a lot in there, but the first thing you talked about was deep knowledge, and the first thing I think of when I hear that is, like, the software developers, we get down in the weeds, like, you remember this tabs versus spaces, right? The debate you would have, like,
mhm.
why did we waste time on that? Oh, because the tools were garbage, and we had to have something consistent to look at. So that's where that deep knowledge as a developer comes into play. And then there's also domain knowledge. You need to have deep knowledge into this product you're building and stuff like that. So how did you, when you went from developer to team lead to manager, how did you manage those developers that had that deep knowledge, that had these quirks? They call it herding cats because they're creative, right? A really good developer is creative. So how did you manage that, and how did you help your team grow and learn together?
Do you know what will herd cats? Raptors. Raptors will herd cats any day of the week, okay? You just have to, in some ways, you have to have the deep knowledge yourself. You have to be able to come in quickly, okay? You have to make a decision when it's necessary. But I'll be honest with you, the rest of the time, I simply would say, how should we do it and why? Okay. Mind you, this is a variation off of 37 signals, rubber ducky decoding, right?
Mhm.
I don't care who you tell how and why, but you have to tell how and why. By telling how and why, 9 times out of 10, that developer who wants to take this really weird path will talk themselves out of it all on their own. So you don't have to fight every battle, but you
Right.
need to get them to articulate those battles since they understand the battle isn't worth fighting. Okay. You do also have to have deep domain knowledge. And yes, I have an opinion on tabs versus spaces, but it rapidly became an I don't care because that's
Yep.
irrelevant and the tools should take care of it. And well, we move to tools that make that irrelevant. But that's a tools versus domain topic. And I think that's another thing as we look at this, that there's a lot of data associated with the conversations you just had. And really what we need to do is make sure we're applying the right constraints. The constraints we have for our tools are going to be different than the constraints we have for our domains. And if we're going to change those constraints, we're going to come out with different decisions because we have different constraints. Okay. So I think that's a big thing is that as a leader, your number one purpose is to make the right decisions. Sometimes no decision is a decision. In my case, just tell me what you think and let them make the decision themselves. That's a decision point, right? In other cases, going, I've heard all the sides. This is a very difficult decision. I am in charge for a reason to make difficult decisions, and you just have to make the difficult decision. And you have to hold that decision as tightly as you need to. And I know that sounds weird, right? Because sometimes you just have to hold on to that decision until you can see it to its end. And sometimes you have to hold that decision so loosely and go, oh, well, that was 2 weeks worth of wasted time. We've made a mistake here. The constraints were wrong or the data was wrong. Let's go ahead and abandon this decision, take our lessons learned. Maybe we thought we had A, B, and C. We find out we chose A. From the data, from the results of that, we end up creating this choice D, right? So we're going to hold our decisions as loosely as we have to. And if we do have to let them go, we're actually going to look to see if there's actually new decisions we could have made as part of that. So I have found that by using this process of making the hard decisions, allowing users to, or allowing my staff to make the decisions that they need to, and then having the, I don't want to use the word courage, but just the wherewithal to change the decision when you need to, right? It's your responsibility. There we go. Taking the responsibility to change the decision when you need to, and taking the responsibility of if a decision didn't go well, right? That's your job as a leader, right? And the sooner you do that, the sooner you decide that a bad decision was a bad decision, and you decide why, thereby affecting your data, your constraints, and the next decision, right? You become a better leader. The results from the company become better, and hopefully you retain those people who need that deep knowledge so they can continue to make even better decisions with you going forward.
Yeah, that's great. What I try to do, which sounds like what you're as well, is as I lead, I've replaced control for influence. Like I don't need
Mm.
control, but I need the appropriate influence to lead my team and let make those tough decisions, like you were saying.
And to be honest with you, though I have the title co-founder, I am not CEO. I am not a head of sales anymore. I am not head of this, that, and the other thing. I have a nebulous external title. As a matter of fact, if you look on LinkedIn, I'm master of eclectic obligations because I get to move from one problem to another. I get to move from one opportunity to another. I still get to have great influence inside the company, even though I don't really have a normal day job anymore.
Hmm. Well, that's kind of the best day job to have, right? Something that's different every day. Instead
It
of
is.
coming in
And
as
there's always a problem to be solved,
course, yeah.
and some of them are more stressful than others.
I I can imagine. Well, maybe a little bit. I don't know everything. So on our previous call, we talked about AI and you mentioned, deterministic versus AI decision making, calculating sales tax. All you got to know is the county and the rate. And if it's inside the city, you have that stuff. But it's very simple, right? It's not going to change every hour. It's going to change every election
Right.
cycle or whatever, right? It doesn't change very often. But then there are other things like, well, how do I how do I route this package through the appropriate system, right? That could change. That's like basic routing, and AI is great for that. So how do you find that balance between using the right how do you find the way to use the right tool for the job?
You have to ask yourself a question. Does it have an answer or does it have probabilities of an answer? It's that simple. It really is that simple. Okay. When we're talking about calculating costs, there's only one answer. Okay. The carrier is going to tell you that answer, and you can probabilistic as much as you want. They're not going to change their answer. So if you can create a discrete solution that will create the same answer, you've succeeded, right? When it comes to label generation, there you can't hallucinate a carrier label. There's only one way to create it right. And for carriers like the United States Post Office, if you are literally a pixel off, they can leave your packages on the dock. Okay, so you definitely want a discrete solution for that. Now, also with carrier EDI, right? We don't want to hallucinate an X12 or an Edifact EDI to an LTL carrier. We don't want to use the wrong data inside an API for a small parcel carrier. And if we're using EDI for them as well, we don't want to mess up that PLD O200 transaction. We need it to be exactly correct. Anywhere where we need specificity, we can use a discrete component. Anywhere where we have probability. So you mentioned routing, right? Though the routing part isn't as important as the actual time in transit it's going to take, which can be affected by so many external things. It's highly probabilistic. That is the one area I see in shipment execution. Okay, I'm talking about shipment execution, not planning, not picking, not put away, anything of that. Again, there's a lot of probabilities in those items that I just mentioned. But when we're talking about the routing piece itself, the time in transit, yeah, that's where AI would come into play. And I think by just thinking about it as, is there a probabilistic answer here or is there an answer? We can now determine what we're going to do. Now, I like to talk about discrete technology. Well, creating discrete technology is very probabilistic. So as we look at where Codex, Claude Code, Gemini CLI, and all the various contenders out there that are generating code, all of a sudden we do have yet another reason to look at AI to create deterministic code. We still need to regulate that really well. We have to have really truly need to be a test driven development house. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of very bad stuff, and you're never going to be able to tell the AI when it's done a good job. But I think that's where we're seeing a lot of changes. And as we go a little deeper into this, let me pause for a second to see if you had a follow up before I drop into the domain knowledge piece in AI.
No, let's go for it.
Okay. So we were mentioning in the pre-show retaining and maintaining developers and teaching them and building, you know, deep diving their knowledge into specific things, right? Why is that important? And why, to me, why do I think, as somebody who's been in technology for nearly 30 years, why is it so important to build that in house? It's important to build that in house is because as we go towards AI development, the one thing rather than building AI slop, you're going to be as good as your developer's ability to communicate their understanding of the domain to the models that are going to execute the discrete code. Okay. And I think that is a huge key here. So if you are in a market where your knowledge of that market is valuable, in my case, small parcel, LTL, same day, air freight, ocean freight, things of that nature, our knowledge in those various subdomains, the better they are, the better code we create. And as we're going to move from creating that code by hand, one letter at a time per muscular stroke, right? And we're going to move to having thousands of lines of code created automatically while we're sleeping, as we've got armies of agents combining together. How we communicate to those AI agents is going to be 100% dependent on two things. Number one is our AI knowledge, or I'm sorry, our domain knowledge. And number two is our ability to put that into writing. So that's why, to me, having your developers, close to the vest, having them in house. I'm not a big fan of externalizing your development if your product is the key. Okay. We sell our product. That's important to us. If your product isn't the key, if it's just a one off to help you do business, I can understand, externalize that, right? There's a reason you buy multi carrier shipping software rather than building it in house. You externalize it. Hopefully, you're externalizing it to somebody like us that keeps deep domain knowledge personnel on staff and invests in improving their domain knowledge on a routine basis. Because that domain knowledge, much like I talked about that decision that we were holding loosely before, or as tightly as we needed to, that domain knowledge needs to be held that way too. If we were talking only 15 years ago, there was really only three carriers in the United States: UPS, FedEx, and the United States Post Office. Nowadays, DoorDash, Uber, Viho. I mean, you just look at the thing and you see the big three. Not only did they lose a full quarter of their business to Amazon, but we also see the big four losing about 1% per year to all the other carriers. And this has been going on for years. So the domain as we understood it 10, 15 years ago is very different. Even the domain as we understood it 2 years ago is markedly different. And if we're using 2 year ago domain knowledge, we are not going to have AI create the discrete code we need.
Oh, that's a good point. And I look at AI coding agents more like the price of gasoline. As it goes down, people go on road trips, right? When writing code is almost free, now let's create cool apps that can help our business run more effectively. What are your thoughts on that?
There's a couple different names for it. I prefer to use Jevons paradox, right? Jevons was an economist in London back in the 1800s as coal use was getting more efficient, and he found that the more efficient it became, the more people used coal, right? So what did he do? He invested in coal and made a lot of money.
Yeah.
The same thing is happening here. It's just like you said, AI is bringing down the cost of development. So you got two choices, and I just posted this on LinkedIn the other day. You got two choices as a company. You can get rid of people and reduce cost and increase that bottom line. Great. Or you got choice number two. You can double down on the value you're putting into your product. You can add features nobody else has because nobody's ever had the time to do it. Nobody has the domain knowledge to understand the feature that was necessary. And now that you are providing features that nobody knew they needed until they saw your product, whose product are they going to buy? That cheap one or the one that has that new feature that you've created, right? And that's the way we're looking at it, right? In the past, we support 145 carriers. Okay. Why? Because 8,000 is hard. Okay. Am I going to support 8,000 carriers in the future? There's a significantly better possibility of that now. If I only need to write a project spec once and connect an AI to a live set of data from the carrier, all of a sudden, I don't really have a lot of personnel time in that, and these things can run day and night, and maybe I can support 8,000 carriers around the world with product perfect capability. Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I become the number one small parcel shipment execution product around the globe, right?
Yeah, that's
This
exactly
is
right.
what Yeah. This is what you have to think about if you are a software engineering shop. Are you going to be a few feature cheap, and if you're the cheaper you are, the more likely you are to be commoditized, or are
Mhm.
you going to be maybe the cost leader, but you're the cost leader because you are now the undisputed value leader.
Yeah, value is the word of the right there, right? Everything's about value. Yeah, like we talked about Word, mail merge isn't valuable. But if you're one of those 8,000 providers, right?
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden you get picked up by one company, who's everyone gonna go with that they use? Yep.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer.
And and by the way, I've got some marketers who strongly disagree with you about mail merge not being valuable. So I think that a lot of the features is know your audience, right?
Yeah, it's not valuable to me.
Yeah, exactly. Likewise, I'm not going to put social media components inside my product because the last time I saw social media in a warehouse, somebody was getting in trouble for using it, right? So
That's interesting. Yeah, so where do you see your company going in the future? Where do you see software development and logistics heading?
I would say in the past, I had a plan that went out 10 years. And in the last 18 months, that 10-year plan has moved to an 18-month plan because honestly, things are moving so much faster. It's almost what is it? The three A's: automation, autonomy, and abundance. We are seeing AI accelerate and become cheaper at such a quick pace that things that I thought were going to take a decade, I now think we can do in 18 months. Okay. So now, even with myself, as I have my downtime, as I try to think into the future, I find that I need to release a lot of the constraints that I've had in my mind based upon the way we've written code over the past 30 years. And I need to expand and look to see what is going to go beyond 2 to 3 years from now, because the world is different. And I see it as revolutionary different as, at least from a software creation standpoint. It's as different as the world was post the press, and as different as it was post the industrial revolution. We are not going to be, even though we have worked so hard with our software development lifecycle to create almost an assembly line, right? To go to industrial revolution, an assembly line process that automates and creates quality. What is the new version of that? Where does everything sit, and how do we as executives change our constraints? Because the data hasn't changed. The constraints that we filter that data through now have changed, and they continue to change with AI to make new decisions. And those important decisions are very simple. We just talked about it. What value do I bring to my product given my current capacities? Right? That's the decision I need to make. And where the constraints in the past have said, well, no, I can't create a new UI this year. That would take several thousand man hours. Well, now will it? That's a incorrect constraint to think about. So I'll be honest with you. My 10-year plans have shrunk to 18 months. I'm actively rebuilding my constraints to determine what it will look like in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, well, and that's still, I think, a very long timeline, 18 months, because, well, and I don't think people understand the accelerated momentum that we have. For instance, I did a Claude Code workshop. We did a simple portal, and then it created a PDF and stuff like that. I stopped for a second. I said, this would take a week to do a PDF because you have the header, you have the footer, you have to make sure, when you have a string that's longer than the width of the space, then you got to calculate the number of lines and multiply that by the font size and the line height and everything.
And don't forget, do you have a carriage return at the end or a carriage return line feed? Because that's two extra characters when you're building your
Yep,
catalog at the bottom.
it's no joke, but it did it. We did 4 prompts in an hour and we built that little portal. I mean, that's not real, but it really did it.
It's a
I
different
think
level
that
of constraints. It's a completely
yeah.
different level of constraints.
Timelines go right out the window. So, what do some of your customers what do you think their challenges are gonna be in the near future here?
Same as mine, decision making. They're gonna have so much possibility and opportunity. How are they going to decide already before AI, we'd already seen a plethora of carriers show up, which here in North America, we don't have as much experience with, right? I've seen some companies actually pull over logistics managers from Europe, where they've got 40 carriers in every country, right, in order to help bring some domain expertise into that. So we're already seeing pre-AI, we're already seeing that plethora of choices become available in a different way. But with AI, not only are we going to have these choices of carriers, but we are also going to have choice of features, and understanding where those features will drive customer retention, reduce cost, and increase quality. I think that's going to be the key for logistics managers going forward. Very clearly, I think that the problem that we still see in a lot of enterprise software stacks, a lack of connectivity, that should be gone in 18 months. I'm going to tell you, I've seen this, the speed of business. It's not going to be gone in 18 months. Okay. We still have companies that are not omni-channel shipping. They still have abandoned stock that they physically have to move from one location to another in order to liquidate it or make it available. So I'm going to tell you, as much as we think our competition is going to supersede us and go faster, we omni-channel has been a word for 10 years and it's still not fully penetrated.
Yeah, it reminds me of the paperless office. I've still got paper.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So, one thing that was interesting with that we didn't discuss is security. So, with AI comes security holes. If you're not a good developer, you wouldn't even know it. And you integrate with a lot of different warehouse management systems. How do you ensure security is in place? Is there something each customer needs to do or something you need to do with your team or what does that look like?
Again, this is you could try to create your own, or you could leverage what's already solved the problem. Okay, there are lots of things out there. I mean, clearly, if you're not buying your software for somebody who's already SOC 2 certified, I mean that means they don't have a process. Okay, there are also industry solutions, zero trust, NIST, all these other things. But the deal is that at a minimum, you want to have security at the edges of every product. At a minimum, okay. So the WMS is a communicates to the shipping software. That should be over a secure tunnel with authentication. Okay. As the WMS communicates to the ERP, likewise, right? So at a minimum, but like drawing a map, borders on a map, you want to make sure that at the border crossings, you have secure data. Okay. And then it's up to you to push each country or product to secure the data inside their product. Okay. And that is a matter of that company saying, okay, well, here's our security policy in our SOC 2. or here's how far we are along with zero trust. Here's the standards that we're following. The beautiful thing is that as a decision maker for development there is you don't have to create it from scratch. There are people much smarter than you that spend their whole lives thinking about security. Steal. I mean, let's just we're gonna take that and we're gonna put it in our product. And if you do it right, again, you can't just say, "Hey, AI, zero trust this thing," right? Because if you do that, it's probably just going to break it. Okay. But again, this is where the domain knowledge comes into play. You give your developers several weeks or months to truly understand, to see where where it needs to go. You have them have conversations with the AI that knows your code base. You have the team now of developers and AI build the plan. Okay. Poke holes in it, do all that. So now it's not all AI and then it's not all people, right? Because if it were either one, it either hallucinate garbage or it's going to take too long. Okay. It's going to take too long. They might miss some things. So we're going to empower both of them together. We're going to let them have those rubber ducky conversations that I talked about earlier. Okay. And then they're going to bring it to you. They're going to explain the various sets of constraints to you. You can validate those constraints and then make your decision as to whether or not their plan is the appropriate one to put into place and how quickly this needs to get put in place without breaking all of your other customers.
Yeah, that's a key. Breaking changes, right? Well, also, if someone's on a different version than the latest, like, you have the whole versioning thing for the anyway, we
Well,
could go down that.
and look, that was a decision that we made early on. All of our components are modular and therefore can be, we really care about the isolation of concerns, and it is our
Mhm.
interface between them that matters. We could rewrite half of our code in JavaScript tomorrow or Rust or whatever we wanted to, because what matters is the communication between the components, not the components themselves. So by isolating your modules or containers or whatever you want to use, please note, just because you've heard the word containers doesn't mean everything should be written containerized. There is orchestration costs, so you have to make sure you understand the costs of doing something like that. But in our case, we are modular because orchestration costs are important. We are more like the Concorde than we are a large body plane, right? We need to get you across the ocean quickly, right? Because, well, you've just paid millions of dollars for a conveyor solution. You don't want to turn it down to slow. You want it going so fast that it looks like what's that franchise, The Fast and the Furious? The boxes are tilting as they go around the corners, right? That's what you want to do because you paid millions for that and you need an ROI. You don't want to slow that thing down to rush hour traffic.
Yeah, exactly. Was there anything else, that you wanted to cover?
So we've talked about, the other thing I will say, and I'm talking to anybody who's a founder out there, especially a technical founder. I mentioned I'm lucky enough to float around. Okay. I mentioned that I'm not the CEO type. Okay. And that's really because I'm not an MBA type. Look, I understand the numbers. I get along very well with our CFO. She has educated me on more things than I thought I could know in life. Okay. She's just the amount of stuff the CFO knows is amazing. And likewise, I think I've taught her a little bit about software and small parcel shipment execution. But that being said, the number one best decision we made was to merge our company with our largest reseller. They had all the salespeople, the marketing people, and they also had the people that had more of that MBA business savvy. They let us because we picked the right people to merge with. They let us continue to drive the product. Okay. So it didn't become what we see when like a VC picks up a company and they squeeze it. Right. No, it allowed us to continue to drive value into the product. And they, because they were successful at sales, were able to extract that value from the customers. And so that really was that synergy that made it happen and also proved to me that I didn't have to do everything. I could focus on where my skills were needed. I could focus on ensuring that value got driven into the product and that value was realized by the customers who paid for it.
Yeah, that's a great move because the last thing we need is private equity leveraging the company against itself for the sale and then
Mhm.
having a loss and having to close the doors, but they left all the way to the bank for This happens lots of times.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's crazy. It's wild. I love your story. I love chatting with you. If people want to get a hold of you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So Justin Cramer, last name Cramer. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find, yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place to find me. Of course, ProShipInc.com. That's inc.com, right? That's where you can find all of our stuff, information about us. Our marketing team, like I said, they do a great job. They've taught me a lot as well. We continuously at trade shows, we do quarterly webinars for our customers. There's just a lot of ways where between ProShipInc.com or finding me on LinkedIn, you can find out about more about us and our product. And if you just happen to be at Parcel Forum, I am an annual speaker at Parcel Forum. Now, mind you, I'm going to get nerdy. I'm always going to be talking about small parcel labels or connections to ERPs or stuff of that nature. So if you really want to get deep and you want to increase your domain knowledge, feel free to look me up there.
Love it. Well, this is another episode, and we'll catch you again next time.